Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Mueller. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Last time on the show, we had Erin Holmes and Dr. Ann Gillies stop in. They were talking about, well, a number of different topics, including the DSM-5 was one of them, and really just how we're going to unmask this trans movement from the beginning to the end. And there's a lot of steps along the way that you need to educate yourself on, and that's exactly why we bring in an expert such as John Mueller. John, great to have you on the show today as always. Maybe you could do a quick recap of part one so people get caught up if they happen to miss that episode. You don't want to miss it because there's a lot to it. And part two is going to be a whole lot more. So take it away, John.
Brad, I appreciate it. And I strongly recommend people go back to watch part one because we are doing a deep dive, actually just covering the surface on a topic, but it'll probably feel like a deep dive for a lot of people, connecting the dots and looking at what I believe is the ultimate part of the Trojan horse, which is the push to destigmatize, normalize, and eventually legalize pedophilia. Pedophiles are using the trans movement as their ultimate means to an end. And they're coming at it from a number of angles. And we have with us Erin and Dr. Gillies. I know as I am shocked by what I'm hearing from Erin. I've done a deep dive into this, but she has done a very deep dive, and we're going to go into more of this.
Absolutely. And yes, Erin, I'd like to say I enjoyed our conversation last time, but that would not be the right word. I am very, I feel like Brad, very emotional actually, because pedophilia has affected our family personally. And what you shared, we've just skimmed the surface so far, and you are taking us far deeper. So this session, we're going to talk about two different things. We're going to talk about the Raven Project, and we're going to talk about prostasia, and you decide which one we do first. But these are really, really two very important things that we need to pull apart a lot more than we were able to in the last session. So yeah, take it away, Erin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I think what we discussed before a little bit about prostasia. I'll go back to, I think, John, you and I met through Project Raven, a project I coordinate, co-founded by Dr. Alaric Nod, which tracks and compiles data on individuals and organizations that promote pedophilia and child abuse narratives. And what's on the screen right now is the Raven Association, which was a lobbying group started by some intelligence veterans from the National Crime Agency, which is UK's agency for organized crimes. They're from Interpol, Homeland Security, all over. So the work I do, it relies on the research of mostly anonymous volunteers. Some of that research is sometimes sent to law enforcement agencies, depending on what we find. But the problem is these agencies are inundated, and the research has to be presented in a certain way for them to be able to open an investigation. Most of what we find, we publish on thepublicinsight.org, or we hand it off to news agencies. I've coordinated publishing work with Glenn Pounder, who you see here. I think he's in this photo. Yeah, there he is on the right. He's an intelligence veteran with the National Crime Agency, UK's agency for organized crime. And Glenn works with the Child Rescue Coalition, which is a nonprofit that enables law enforcement to identify, arrest, and prosecute child predators. And they're doing a very effective job at tracking and pulling together the evidence that's needed to do this. This is a very difficult work. You need a lot of human resources as well as software resources, which is what the Child Rescue Coalition provides. For this to have any effect, the Child Rescue Coalition has helped law enforcement to make over 1,400 arrests. They've rescued over 3,000 children in 97 different countries. And what you see here, the Raven Association, this is comprised of veterans and law enforcement, commanders who worked on task forces for internet crimes against children, and they now serve as the lobbying arm to combat some of these deregulatory drives we're seeing in Washington that enable child sexual abuse. And I'm really excited for this group because this is really the missing piece. There's such a deregulatory drive that leads to the breakdown of normative structures, and it's so strong that we really need people mobilizing against it. And I don't know anyone who understands this space better than them.
You all, Erin, I consider you also a hero. You've been doing a deep dive into the dark underbelly of this. As a matter of fact, you have written important material. I'm going to find it behind the scenes here. And your work, here we are. Okay. See if did I do it right? Is this your public?
Yeah,
there
yes.
There we go. So would you describe, I want people to go and visit your site, thepublicinsight.org, because as you're talking, you described to us this article, but then I'm going to scroll down so people can see how much in terms of what you've written and the resources available. Talk to us about Public Insight and your part in this.
Sure. Well, the internet, it's sort of become the ultimate dark alley where pedophiles form these supportive online communities with others who display similar deviant and criminal interests. And, they indulge in these sexual fantasies, mostly online, and they're so open about it because there really is this, they already believe, a lot of them really already believe that, pedophilia has been normalized. And these groups give agency to, the in-groups of pedophilia normalization to the point where they really no longer have to hide in dark web chat rooms. They do this all online.
They are emboldened. So this article, you have a lot of different links. So I want people to understand that as you're sharing with us, I'm going to get down to the bottom of literally. Okay, I don't want to make people sick here. You've got a lot of different links. Bear with me, everyone. Look, there's the references, but I want people to see that as Erin is talking to us, she's not just somebody that I met on the internet. I mean, on Twitter. That's how we sort of met in social media. But there's a lot as far as articles and links. So there's the issue of minor attracted persons that we were just talking about. So please go on to thepublicinsight.org under Erin's name, because Erin, you have been working at this for a while, for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I really need to.
Me and others.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I really need to know, how come these individuals aren't being arrested? How can we have an open conversation about this topic without any arrests? Isn't pedophilia both illegal in Canada and the United States?
Deregulation. You have a lot of laws that, people were never really aware existed that really protected children. I mean, looking into Just Prostatia, which is how I sort of, I think they were the first organization I ever researched. They sold themselves as a child protection charity, but they advocate for illicit practices like how to avoid law enforcement sting operations and the solicitation of minors in chat rooms like Roblox, which is a popular children's gaming platform. They claim that, they have the freedom to engage in age play on these platforms, which is where an adult will pretend to be a child. Usually they do it in places where they have access to children, which is no coincidence. The same organization, Prostatia, claims that child abuse prevention should involve teaching children about fetishes and kink. And they did an interview where Noah Berlatsky, who writes for NBC, where they claim that viewing child pornography can have a positive impact on children. And these aren't just nobodies who are involved. This was Noah Berlatsky, the journalist from a journalist who writes for NBC, who conducted this interview, and ultimately, they wrote up this blog. This can all be found online on their website, and also in my work, I write about it and reference it. But they're extremely deluded and forthcoming about what they want, and at times. But then you see them sort of, pull back, and then they hide behind these laws that protect them. But I think that's why there's such a strong deregulatory drive. Even in 2019, Jeremy Malcolm, Prostacia's founder, he was a member of the multi-stakeholder advisory group of the United Nations Internet Governance Forum. And there was a critical policy event that year that took place where they drafted, yes, it's right here, where they drafted guidelines regarding the implementation for a protocol on the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the sale of children in regards to prostitution and pornography. So Prostacia petitioned the substitution argument against the UN guidelines that would effectively call to criminalize obscene images depicting children. And the objective is to influence globally, which is, what they've managed to do in the US is actually bring down a few laws. In the US, they were able to legalize child exploitation materials. In Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition, the Supreme Court opinion, which was responsible for striking down portions of a federal act that banned, basically, it referenced in legal documents. So this was the Supreme Court opinion responsible for striking down portions of a federal act banning what was referenced in legal documents as virtual child pornography, but I don't like to call it that. What it's more accurately referred to as child exploitation material. And this happened in 2002. And it only took them a year to do. This is how fast they've been able to successfully break down laws, that sort of hold up normative structures in society.
And this was 2002 that law was kind of turned over. And so we have all of this stuff going on. It is so just even beginning to get our mind wrapped around it all and to think of how do we deal with all of this? You have a group there that you showed who have, I think you said, rescued 3,000 children. That is like the very tip of the iceberg. We don't need those kind of groups of people in every city in the US and Canada taking down these networks, and we don't have people. So what are you thinking? How do parents, how does the average Joe kind of help or deal with any of this?
And the first thing we need to know is that this is a very real issue. This is a very real push. And so men like James Cantor, who was a part of Prostacia, I don't know to what extent he is now, right? But they will try to justify, quote unquote, minor attraction, which again is just a euphemism for pedophilia. And there's an active push using academics and researchers to try to really spin a narrative. Erin, and that's what you are helping us see, that this is a very real and active movement. Matter of fact, I'll bring up that article about Prostacia, and we can begin to
the
show
wording
that
is so important there, John.
As a matter of fact, this is how tricky they are online. This was a screenshot of the kind of material they put out, right? So you'll always see predators toy with the term with words, but consent in context, right? It's not really what it looks like. It depends upon the context. I know a naked man is hugging a kid, but it depends upon the context. So let me read this. This is from Prostacia, right? Consent and pleasure should be a part of sex education. It doesn't lead kids to have sex earlier, really, but it does help to ensure, here it is, listen to the spin.
Yeah.
It does help to ensure their first experiences are wanted and enjoyed, well-timed, and within their control. That is exactly what pedophiles and sex offender treatment come out with at first. If they continue on saying that kind of stuff, they're failed out and they're sent back to prison.
We're talking about children wanting and enjoying. Like, this is absolutely so deviant, so dark. It's just so, Erin, when you read this stuff, and you've just delved into this dark world in such a deep way. I think it's important for parents to understand that there are people out there they can trust, because you start feeling like you can't trust the academics. We know that. We know that you can't trust them. So we need to have places where parents can go, that they can have good, trustworthy conversations that will speak truth. Where are those places?
And Anne, sorry for interrupting. People need to understand that these pedophiles are the ones that want to give these kids their first experience.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy.
You have resources like, RAIN, or the Child Rescue Coalition, where, they have actual task forces who are interested in helping children. You really have to look for the traditional organizations, because the organizations like Prostasia and the Free Speech Coalition, which was responsible for striking down the Supreme Court opinion that banned, CSAM, these organizations, I've noticed, are all from California. And there's that wordplay there where they will file in the state of California as nonprofit public benefit charities. But really, who are they benefiting? They're benefiting the interests of pornographers, pedophiles, and sex workers. That's who they benefit.
Yeah.
So Erin, talk to us about this article. This is prostasia.info that people can access.
Yeah, and they really should. This was, what is this? Yeah, this is Fertiline's website. I credit him with ringing the bell on this and on Prostasia. And this is, he wrote this after I think he found them online. And it was one of those, like, you just can't believe it moments, right? That an organization,
as you're talking, I'm going to scroll. So what should people say? He goes through, what is the foundation? Who's involved? What has Prostasia spent resources on? What have others said about Prostasia? How does it raise funds? Which organizations to fight? That's just in who's behind the website. He's done a really nice job with this.
He has. And the funding was an important component, because it's like, okay, well, who does fund this? And according to Prostasia, hardly anyone. They don't want to be associated with it. Even James Cantor, I'm not even sure, is listed as the board of advisors anymore. People sort of moved away from it. But you still have organizations like Before You Act, who, work as a civil liberties union, sort of in between. You still have other organizations, newer ones that have cropped up in the last few years. And they all, at least the ones that I found, they organize as nonprofits in the state of California. The charities there are regulated through the Attorney General's office, who basically all they require are annual filings to ensure that charitable assets are going towards intended use. But I think there's some serious gaps in oversight and, into the unlawful practices within these organizations, which reveals really the way these laws can be exploited to tap into federal resources. So pro-pedophilia groups have basically learned how to infiltrate the system, especially policy and law.
And with Prostasia, again, people need to understand that this was an organization started by Jeremy Malcolm, at least that's his supposed name. As a matter of fact, do you want to describe a little bit? You did, and this is what was so compelling as I started to look into your work, you did an expose. You want to talk about what you wrote about Prostasia and what has been uncovered?
Sure. I I wrote about Prostasia. I hit up on the points, a lot of the points that you'll see on the prostasia.info website. I think that's a really good place to start if you want to learn more about how these organized pro-pedophilia organizations really operate. I found that, Prostasia was actually advocating for illicit practices, like how to avoid law enforcement, sting operations, and the solicitation of minors in chat rooms. And that in itself, I was kind of hoping would be, against any laws regarding charities, that the Attorney General's office would see that as a violation, maybe even, I think, a bigger violation than any, financial fraud could ever take place, because it's actually criminal. They teach all sorts of things, they teach pedophiles how to engage in age play. They claim children should, they claim child abuse prevention includes teaching children about fetishes and kink. They put all sorts of videos on their TikTok about this. They claim viewing pornography can have a positive impact against children.
And that's why inevitably
they actively lobby.
Yeah, inevitably these what you will see is there's an active effort to downplay the dangers of pornography. That's one thing. That's one of the first things you can ask any of these individuals to find out which side of the fence they're on. I recommend that as a screening or an assessment tool for anybody. Ask them whether or not they feel pornography is dangerous.
The other thing that's going through my mind right now, I think you mentioned this in the first interview, was mafia connection. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think you said something about that. And also what's going through my mind, I'm thinking about child sex trafficking. So to me, it would seem that all of this is so interconnected, and so much of it is just connected virally, right, through the internet, and just luring children in every which way they can. But as they retrain the minds of the children, they're more accepting, more easily lured, and then ending up in being trafficked and prostituted. There's just so many. It's like the spokes coming out of a wheel to me, Erin. But there's big money in this.
Converted into being
Big
toys. Money. Toys for adult men. Sickening and disgusting.
Yes, and I heard Glenn Pounder say once that the 29 million cyber tips that are sent in to organizations that work with sex trafficking and things like that aren't anywhere near the true scale of the problem. It's a huge problem, and there really aren't enough resources being thrown at it. It's very difficult to get a case opened, very, very difficult. And if you do get a case opened, it's difficult to investigate it. You have to send them just the proper files to the proper format for anything, to be accepted. Otherwise, it's admissible. There are all sorts of problems.
It seems to me that these individuals, and there are multitudes of them by the looks of it, the sounds of it, can get through all the loopholes. And so how are we going to close this? I'm not really expecting you to have all the answers, but we need to have hope somewhere in this, and it seems so overwhelming.
Yeah, they've really learned how to work a system. They've really learned how to work a system in policy and law to their favor and benefit. And in part, I think what's needed is a lot of institutions need to actively, work against this. And I think they're afraid to do that, afraid of the backlash, afraid of the pushback. But that's why the pedophiles are so active in trying to get people to think or to believe that it's a sexual orientation because it'll grant them civil liberties. And if they're granted civil liberties, it will be considered a sexual identity. You and I wouldn't be able to have this conversation anymore.
That's right.
It would completely shut that down.
It'll be hate.
Yeah.
Well, and I go back to this Alan Walker, who published a book, I think 2019 perhaps, or no, maybe it was 2021, A Long Dark Shadow. So he was talking about minor attracted people. He is a she, actually. I better get this right. But he was actually fired from the university that he was working at in Virginia because of his views. And then in 2022, he was hired by Johns Hopkins Child Sexual Abuse Center. It blows my mind. How can these academic centers just blindly, knowing the presuppositions this person make, put them in a child abuse center working with children? This is what we have to, as parents, grandparents, and legislators, we have to start standing up against such perversion and criminality.
And actually, if I might, let me add another piece, Erin, because then you'll be able to connect some dots for us. So Alan Walker was fired by Old Dominion once it came out that he's pushing the normalization of pedophilia. Well, it turns out a year later, he was a keynote speaker for ATSA's conference, the Association for the Treatment of Sexual Abuse perpetrators, basically. Okay, that's the organization. I'm a part of it. That anybody that works with sex offenders is a part of. So think about that for a keynote address in their annual conference. They also had somebody that was speaking about kind of critical race theory and how the system now is tainted. So you have this shift within training those that are going to be able to assess sex offenders, assess level of risk, that they are now having their perspective shifted from looking at the predation aspect of these men to viewing them as victims. It's shifting sympathies. And we wonder how, and the public needs to understand this. Have you ever heard of a situation, a guy, based upon how much porn he has and what kind of porn, it's clear he's a sex offender. It's clear he's done heinous things. Benjamin Levin is a classic example. The former education secretary of Ontario got out after just a couple of years, and now he's back online on Twitter. He's a heinous individual, tons of heinous child porn. He was influential in the SOGI sex ed material in Canada. And so these guys are able to work things in such a way that policies, professional trainings, sentiment, certification courses are all being impacted, and little by little, the ability to see these guys, these sexually deviant men who've progressed through various stages into white-collar psychopathy, where they are predators, they're now being viewed with a sympathetic eye. This is very methodical. Erin, talk to us. You have connected a lot of those dots. The strategy is unbelievable to eventually legalize or normalize and destigmatize and grant civil rights status to pedophiles.
Yeah, there's a saying that, you can refine the obscene until it becomes mundane. And at this point, it's easier to accept. And I think that that's what's happening here. You're seeing these things, they're obscene. We know they're obscene, but they refine them until, little by little, at the end, it seems so mundane that part of it is accepted. And they try to get you to accept, the small things in order to accept the larger things, because they need, and seek this sort of societal consent. And this is what they're really getting, right? They're just not grooming children, they're grooming all of us. That's what seeking societal consent needs. And this is why they spend so much time online. This is why you see so much, media dedicated and written about them. And I think that the objective to destigmatize pedophilia rests on this. Refining the obscene until it all becomes mundane and accepted. And I think the only way to really prevent this, and what I really hope institutions especially begin doing, is to be explicit about these boundaries, what's true and what's not, to marginalize falsehoods, right? Otherwise, they're collaborators.
That's right. And as we have to wrap up, but I'm just thinking that the grassroots, parents, and others interested in protecting our children need to know and understand what Erin's saying, and to join together and rise up to make sure our institutions take action. That's, I believe, what needs to happen. We have to put our money where our mouth is, make our mouths loud, and we have to move forward. We're going to talk to you again in the not too distant future, I think, Erin. So, John, final words. And
Erin, thank you. So I've got to say thank you for your work. Would you be willing to come back? We've just scratched the surface on all of this.
Sure. Yeah.
Brad, this is heavy stuff, but this is really what people need to see as we unmask the trans movement. This is not just about glitter and all the fun little stuff that we're being told that these kids just it's just about affirmation. Oh no, this is about a much bigger agenda being played out right in front of us.
Harming children is something that doesn't go away, unfortunately, at this point in time. We need to protect our children, and to do that, alpha males everywhere need to stand up and keep that back strong. It's not a fight for our kids, it's a fight for us. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Thank you very much to Erin Holmes today. Thank you very much to Dr. Ann Gillies and John Euler for being part. I'm Brad Wilder.